Uh, okay. All right. Excellent. So, hi, Jim.
Hey,
Nice to see
Artie.
you again. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you. Doing well. Excited. Going to start serializing Lou Reed's Nephew tomorrow. So it's been a long time, kind of. I guess it's been 16 months, maybe 18 months since it appeared in Novel Slices. So excited to start sharing the rest of it.
Yes, and we're so excited to see it. I can't wait. So I have a list of questions here, and my first question, though, is, how did you come up with the idea for the character of Lou Reed's nephew? It's such an interesting, connection with the singer, and yet the person never gets their own name in the entire novella, right, or novel, right?
Well, probably like all good ideas, I stole it directly from Diderot. So Diderot wrote this very funny dialogue in 1760 called Rameau's Nephew that I came across. It's still read, but I came across it in studying philosophy. And the thing that delights me almost more than anything is when I find out that we are not, in fact, the most knowing, sarcastic people who have ever lived. So I really like to find old stuff that is very snarky and irreverent and counterintuitive. And Rameau's Nephew is all of that, and it is a dialogue between someone who is often thought to be Diderot and a figure who's known as Rameau's nephew, who is the nephew of Rameau, who was a kind of a famous composer whose star was kind of fading. So I really fell in love with this dialogue and its tone, and I started going, "Huh, if if this was written today, who would they be the nephew of?"
Yes.
And that's where I changed it from Rameau to Lou Reed's nephew. And then the first chapter really takes from the part that struck me about Rameau's nephew, which is that there's this amazing scene in which he explains that he makes a living teaching violin lessons to like the daughters of the aristocracy, but proclaims that he knows nothing about the violin.
That sounds very familiar. That sounds super familiar.
Exactly. So it was with that
Yeah.
kind of, you know, insight, I'm going, okay, let's make this today.
Yeah.
Ramo becomes Lou Reed, and what would they be teaching? And as you know, in chapter one, he is teaching young girls how to text.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I love that scene. It's wonderful. Yeah, and so readers of novel slices, you'll recognize that, and you'll be ready for the rest. And so then, how about this narrator who falls into the orbit of Lou Reed's nephew? So, I mean, I have this crazy idea of you looking at your bookshelf one day, and there was The Great Gatsby, and you open it up, and bam, you're like, I can do this, but I'll make it funny, and Gatsby will be Lou Reed's nephew, and Nick Carraway will be an IT guy who's building a database of databases with a partner in Uzbekistan. But how did you actually come up with this wild narrator?
Uh, Again, it started with the Diderot, but the Diderot is actually written as a dialogue where I think it's a Soi himself and Louis, and him. But I didn't want to write it as a dialogue. So I like the Gatsby comparison, which what would you call that? The interesting friend, right? The
Right.
narrator is writing about the interesting friend, but the person that really kind of took over is Saki, actually, H. Monroe, whose Edwardian short stories he actually wrote in newspapers, and the most famous series of them, I think, are the Reginald stories, which basically Reginald is just this friend of his that he sits next to at cocktail parties, and Reginald just tears everyone apart. So it's this.
Yeah.
So I found that to be a very interesting, and it opens up a lot of possibilities to basically have the narrator be somebody who's just listening to someone who has kind of all these outrageous opinions. So I like the Gatsby. But where I really found it and found the possibilities was the Diderot and then the Saki. And I think the Reginald Tales are another case of You got to read them. They are so funny. Also, the
Yeah,
Clovis tales, they are just so irreverent. And I actually have to, in the book, I do make reference to Saki to kind of give him a little bit of a tribute. But his stuff is just
that's all.
outrageously fun.
Yeah, no kidding. And also, I mean, it's interesting. You really hit a sort of a vein in letters. You know, there's Langston Hughes had all those books about simple, who of course is anything but simple.
Mhm.
And so it's yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
I
So you
think I
have this
tripped into it, but then found out why it's so attractive as a structure.
right, right. No, it's really it's one of those ones where I mean it just never would occur to me naturally. And then but it's so natural when you're reading it. That's the great thing about Lou Reed's Nephew is that there's no there's no artifice. It's just this beautiful story unfolding, and you're there with the narrator and all his troubles with the database of databases, and yet you're also hanging out with him. He's got this side project which actually becomes much more interesting than his main project. Um,
Yes.
so there you've got this interesting this duo here, and so one's a visionary who doesn't follow through, can't, complete his project, and the other one's a perfectionist. Um, Even though, I'm sorry, one's a visionary as Lou Reed's nephew, and then there's the narrator is a perfectionist. And do you think most of us are like this? Do you think that we're sort of, going in between, back and forth between sort of perfectionism, but also, this sort of grand vision status?
I really like this question, Hardy, mostly because I don't think I would have seen it that way, but I like you asking that. I think that's a very interesting question that hopefully the book does open up a little bit. I think I was more inclined to see Lou Reed's nephew and the narrator as the same person at different stages in life, which I think can also be read that way. Because sometimes, frankly, myself, I'm in a very kind of in one of the pitches, informal pitches that I use for it, not very often, is it's New York 2013, and an older jerk talks to a slightly younger jerk, and I am both jerks.
Excellent.
So, but I could also see that as being kind of two types of what we always are, visionary versus pragmatist,
Absolutely.
and definitely the book is very much about idealism versus realism, and what, um, yeah, what should we shoot for, and what can we accomplish? How free can we be? And it gets into those sorts of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So um, I want to go back to this database of databases.
Yeah,
It's going to be like such a powerful tool for finding things to do.
which is the most important thing for the internet. We need things to do.
Right. We're on this thing that's where we're not doing anything.
Right. And we're going to have to find all the things that we need to do,
Yeah.
or we're going to be helpless. I guess we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, that was my question. It's just, it reminds me of that Stephen Wright joke about how you can't have everything because where would you put it? Did you where did you get your comedic inspiration for so many great lines in this novel?
I think I like gags. I think I like humor like that. I mean, I do find sometimes I was actually telling this story. My very first short story was published. I won't share the magazine or who it was, but I worked with a fairly famous person who was the editor, and my short story had a joke at the end. It ended with a punchline, really, and he convinced me to take it out. And now, and it's fine. And now, but now, 25 years later, or 23 years later, I think I've realized, and Louis Nephew has it, is I just like the jokes. I like the gags. And I think that sometimes this cuts against the literary aspirations, but I just like them. And I'm trying to see if I can keep both. like
Yes.
the kind of have a weight to it, like I just talked about. I do think the book is about what we can aspire to and stuff like that, and kind of
Yeah.
hopefully gets at some kind of more literary themes, but I also like the gags. I have
Yeah.
to admit. And you mentioned Stephen Wright about in the questions you sent it to me, right? If you had everything, where would you put it? I think Stephen Wright. I mean, he's an heir to Borges, because the person I think
Yes.
about with the database of databases is It's very Borgesian, which I'm obsessed with Borges, and really kind of grew up in the 90s studying philosophy and Borges and stuff like that. But Stephen Wright I mean, in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
he's doing a kind of Borgesian joke. But one other thing is that it really, I mean, I've worked in tech and content, for the last 20 years, and Lou Reed's Nephew is kind of
Oh,
filled with these ideas that are they're kind of almost the byproduct of thinking seriously about how the internet works. You come up
yeah.
with these kind of absurd ideas that are like Swiftian modest proposals about how the internet works.
Yeah.
That kind of follow from the logic of the internet, but are anyway. So I put all those in there,
That's
and it took
great.
me probably 10 years to collect enough to have enough gags, but I put them all in there.
Yes. Yeah. And they're perfect. Yeah. It really is a piece for the age because everyone is just, yeah, uh, everyone is about to get run over because they're staring at their phones and they're stuck on the internet trying to find something to do. Whereas if they just looked up, they might be in the middle of something. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. And how did you think to serialize this novel? Like, this is another thing that's so wonderful that I think you're really on to something here. Salman Rushdie's serializing. A bunch of other people are serializing. I mean, it's this moment. It's this moment of serialization, and we get these pieces, and I think Lou Reed's Nephew fits that perfectly. How did you decide to do that?
Well, I mean, in part because I have not yet found a publisher, and I would want to take it directly to people. But I mean, my writing style matches this. I mean, I've been a short story writer, and it's been hard to get to something longer. And the way I finally did it was with this episodic strategy where there's 40 kind of chunks. So it lends itself to that. And as I mentioned, I mean, all of Saki's pieces, the original pieces, appeared as newspaper columns.
Right.
So it just seemed to be a good match for the content. But it'll be interesting to see how it takes off, because I know when I tell people I'm serializing a novel, it's difficult. I try to explain to them how it's not just going to be a novel that I cut up. It's actually a serialized. It's written in an episodic way that
Right.
will match the medium.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It matches the medium. It also, I think, matches our attention span, unfortunately. I mean, I hate to say that about us now, but that's where we are. As we can get this on. Oh, by the way, so will it come out every Tuesday? Is that what we're looking at?
Actually, it's going to come out every Tuesday and Thursday for about 20 weeks.
Great, great. This is great to know. And oh, that's wonderful.
And I'm
So what
calling
do you?
them, I like to tell people, because I wanted to get into that streaming. I'm not calling them chapters, I'm calling them episodes. And I
Yes,
noticed that you always want to know how many there are. So I just tell people there are 40.
right. 20 weeks, 40
Because I feel like when I'm
episodes.
watching TV, you're like constantly going, how many are there? How many seasons are there? So I'm just telling people there are 40.
That's great. Good to know. Good to know. And the perfect size. I mean, this is like a great summer read. This is what I love, is that it's super deep. I mean, you find yourself thinking about Lou Reed's Nephew and this narrator over and over, and the kind of the back and forth. It's so dynamic. And at the same time, it's not it's not something that sort of hurts your brain. You can read it, and at the beach, you could read it, on the train, or anywhere. I mean, it's just, you can listen to it. It's perfect. Oh, by the way, will you have a listening option? I was going to ask about that. Not yet. It's coming.
It's so interesting. I've been a tinkerer forever. I mean, I was putting out ebooks, in the O's, and I
Oh,
once
wow.
did something based on Google Maps, so I always like to play with technology, also kind of as a side effect. So I do actually think you can automatically have anything read to you on Substack. I
Yeah.
did have an idea that never really came to fruition that there's so many AI reading tools now, is that I was gonna have each chapter read by a different AI. You know what I mean? So I thought that would be very funny and very appropriate to, like, today it'll be read in with a Spanish accent.
Right. Right. That would be great.
But I kind of ran out of road. But that was
Yeah.
my modest proposal.
Well, maybe it will come. We'll see. Okay, so it's totally, by the way, what do you think Lou Reed would think of Lou Reed's nephew?
Lou Reed. Oh
Sorry,
my God. Oh, he wouldn't. He would hate it, I think.
it's possible.
Yeah, I think he
How
would
about,
definitely hate it. He was not a very I don't know, from what I read, about he was a very difficult guy, I think. I mean, obviously, a part of the book
yeah,
is, I think, his entire approach and attitude of, kind of, for lack of, for being too cool for school and kind of detached, is really informed Gen X entirely. And
yep,
I've listened to his records more than I can possibly um, count.
right.
So it's almost part of me. But I think the book kind of questions, where does that where does that land you, and
Yes.
where did that land us as a generation. But no, I don't think he would like it.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. How about, what do you think Lou Reed's nephew would think of Lou Reed's nephew?
Interesting. He changes during the book, but I think that even just us having this conversation, he would find to be kind of earnest
Right.
and flat-footed and sad and kind of unknowing. That we were actually talking about what we were doing in a straightforward way, and that I was trying to find readers for it. I think he would
Yeah.
think it was kind of deeply uncool,
Yeah.
and even boomerish. Even though I'm not a boomer, he would not be able to distinguish me from a boomer.
No, yeah, exactly. My kids call me boomer, even though I'm like, please, I've got a couple of years yet, give me a break. But yeah, no, anybody over 35 is easily a boomer.
Well, and I try to get into that. Is that Gen X is really this in between
Yeah.
generation, that is in a very interesting place. And ultimately, I think we kind of didn't matter. The power
Yeah.
structure went directly from the boomers to the millennials,
Yep.
and we were kind of in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank heavens for oh my goodness, suddenly I'm forgetting his name, the Canadian writer who came up with the term Gen X, because I think if he hadn't come, do you know who that is? Who am I?
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
Douglas Copeland.
yeah,
I
Copeland.
could get very geeky about this, though. Unfortunately, Gen X is actually names a different. His book actually names a different generation than the actual Gen X. It's a people. He's basically
Ah,
naming late boomers.
right.
But Strauss and Howe, who came up with the generational peer, system that we all talk about, actually initially called Generation X in their first book. I told you, warn you, 13th gen, because we were the 13th American generation. But then
Ah,
their second book came out, Generation X had come out, and they changed the name of the generation to Gen X.
so they took Copeland and ran with it, I guess. But it's interesting because I think if we didn't, although I didn't know that we have a backup name, 13th Gen. I just wondered if Copeland hadn't come up with Gen X, maybe we wouldn't have anything.
But part of the book is, I think, what signifies our generation is a skepticism about commitment, really, about belief.
Yes.
It's kind of like we saw Eisenhower let's all be suburban. And
Right.
then the hippies, let's all not be suburban. And both were kind of not any
Like,
good. So it was like, let's not attempt to do anything because it's a certain recipe, it's a recipe for certain embarrassment.
yeah. Yep. That's right. That's true. Well, this is all wonderful. I can't wait for this. So can you tell us again, when, so it's coming out, how do we sign up for it? And we know it's Tuesdays and Thursdays for 20 weeks, 40 episodes in total. And how do we sign up for it again?
Sure. LouReedsNephew.com.
LouReedsNephew.com.
Takes you,
It's free.
yep, takes you right there. It's totally free. I know there are a lot of paid Substacks out there. This is not paid. It's just free. I'd be happy if anybody showed up and share it if you like it. And then it will run for, yeah, about 19 weeks. I have to admit, I wanted to end on October 27th. So I have to do 3 at the end. And well, I won't give it away, but it's almost as if it's taking place in real time in 2013. I guess is what I'm saying. So I had to make
Great.
it match up.
Excellent. So we can, have a little trip back a decade here and then in late October.
Which turned out to be funny. At first, I thought it was too late because the technology is where it is, but now I feel like it's good because it's kind of
Oh yeah.
quaint. I'm like, oh, here's what it was looking like before we saw what was going to happen.
Right. Right. Before AI, before everything. Yeah, we can't give everything away, but this is exciting. It is.
But it does kind of like set it up. It became relevant in a way that I hope it does. It's kind of like before we knew where we were headed, here's what we were thinking.
Where we are. Yeah, where we were. Yeah, exactly. This is perfect. Yeah, Jim, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to add? Any little bits or anything we can add it here?
Nope. Just thanks for you for being an early supporter of it.
Oh, we love it.
I feel that it's gaining some fans. I don't know if you saw it actually. I mean, Michael Martone picked it as runner up for the Texas Review Novella Prize. So I feel that the people who get it, and
Yeah.
thank you for being one of the first to get it. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we are so honored. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sending in a novel slices and for connecting with us. And we're so excited. We will get this out on all our channels, in a way, it's the wrong way to approach it, but because
Right.
but
He
actually it's
would
really
say,
great.
"Oh, it's so." He would go, "What are you going to make a video, boomers? What are you going to do? Send it out of?"
Exactly.
That's what Louis
Exactly.
Nephew would say. He would say, "That's so sad, so
Yeah.
sad for you guys."
So sad. Yeah. MySpace. We'll get our MySpace going and pop it up there.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again, Jim. This has been great. Yeah, this is really wonderful. And we're all looking forward to it. Can't wait. And thanks for taking the
Great,
time to speak to me this morning.
great. So, Hardy, do you think there's anything else I should put on the recording or anything so for you to edit with, or?
Um, maybe, I feel like I cut you off. So if you can do just very quickly, like the 40 episodes, Tuesdays and Thursdays from now to October 27th, totally free, Substack. You can sign up on LouReedsNephew.com. If you can do all that, because we can just make that a real short clip and put it everywhere.
Great. Yep. So Lou Reed's Nephew is launching this week. It's going to be serialized via email. And new episodes will come out every Tuesday and Thursday through October 27th. And it's totally free. And you can just go to LouReedsNephew.com and just enter your email address to sign up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jim. That's perfect. That's great.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Hardy. I really do appreciate it. I feel like it's gathered fans and supporters along the way, and you were among the first, so I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
And it always and when you said Broadigan, I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Because there's kind of there's 4 things that I think it's come to me. There's the Diderot, Saki, Nathaniel West, Miss Lonely Hearts, and Broadigan. Those are literally the 4 books that I think whenever I got lost about like what can I do, you know what I mean? what's acceptable. Those were kind of the 4 books. So the fact that I didn't mention broad again to everybody and you went broad again, that's like all you can do as a writer, because there's so much for taste. Like, people might not get it, but when somebody detects the thing that you thought you had secretly put in there, you feel like, oh, good, it's working.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad, because immediately I was like, oh, this is like the kids with trout fishing in America across their backs.
That's the book, man. Trout fishing is amazing.
It's great.
I've got an idea.
Oh, great. Excellent. Me too. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jim. I'm going to sign off here, and we're going to try and clip these up. And we're definitely putting announcements up today to get on for tomorrow, and we're trying to get these clips up at ASAP.
Great. And just note, I do think that in the one that's coming up, I think this is probably my error. I think there's an error in the URL. I think there's a stray W in the URL.
Okay.
It might not be.
All right. We'll be careful. We'll double check that.
I think I sent it through. So it's like, it reads Nephew or something like that. Just take a look.
Okay. All right. We'll double check. Thanks for the heads up. That's great.
My mistake, I think.
Oh, no, happens. We might have done it too. That's great. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. Take care.
You too.